Victoria Hale stood in her 47th floor office, staring down at the city below like an empire she'd built with blood and tears. But tonight, she didn't feel powerful. She felt empty. A call from her assistant. "Your meeting has arrived." A stranger walked in, wrinkled shirt, smelling of flour, eyes tired but honest. Not a businessman, not a billionaire, just a single father filling in for his brother at a blind date. And within 5 minutes, Victoria Hale, a woman who never let anyone move her, began to feel something she thought had died long ago. Hope. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes earlier than Daniel had set it. He didn't bother hitting snooze. His hand shot out from under the blanket, slapped the phone silent, and he sat up in the dark, rubbing his face hard enough to leave red marks. The apartment was cold. The heater had been acting up again, and he'd been too busy to call someone. He pulled on a hoodie over his t-shirt and shuffled into the hallway, pausing outside his daughter's room. The door was cracked open. He pushed it wider, just enough to see the lump under the covers, the mess of brown hair spilling across the pillow. Mia. 6 years old, still dreaming. He stood there longer than he should have, watching her breathe. It was the only moment of the day that felt still. Then he turned and went to the kitchen. The bakery was a 10-minute drive if the lights were green, 15 if they weren't. Daniel had been making the trip for 8 years, first with his father, then alone after the old man's heart gave out. And now as the sole owner of Brooks & Sons, a name that didn't quite fit anymore but felt wrong to change. The van smelled like yesterday's sourdough and oil that needed changing. He drove with the radio off, windows cracked despite the cold because the silence helped him think. Or maybe it just kept him awake. By 5:30, the ovens were on. By 6, the first batch of croissants was rising. By 7, the front door was unlocked, and the smell of fresh bread was spilling out onto the sidewalk. Regulars came first. Old Man Cho, who bought a baguette every morning and never said more than 3 words. The woman with the yoga mat who ordered the same oat muffin and black coffee. The construction crew that showed up at 7:45 and cleared out half the pastry case. Daniel worked the counter, pulled espresso shots, wrapped loaves in brown paper, and kept one eye on the clock. Mia's school started at 9. He had until 8:20 to get her up, fed, dressed, and out the door. It was tight, but it worked. Mostly. "Hey, Danny." He looked up. His brother Ethan was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his jacket pockets, grinning like he'd just won something. "Don't call me that," Daniel said, not looking up from the register. "Come on, it's nostalgic. It's annoying." Ethan laughed and walked up to the counter, grabbing a cinnamon roll from the display without asking. He took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded. "Still good." "You gonna pay for that?" "Put it on my tab." "You don't have a tab." "Then start one." Daniel sighed and turned back to the espresso machine. His brother had a way of showing up when things were already complicated, like he had a radar for inconvenience. "What do you want, Ethan? Can't I just visit my favorite brother? I'm your only brother." "Exactly. Makes you the favorite by default." Daniel didn't smile. He pulled a shot, poured it into a to-go cup, and slid it across the counter. "You want something? Say it. I've got about 45 minutes before I need to pick up Mia." Ethan's grin faded a little. He set the cinnamon roll down and leaned on the counter. "Okay, fine. I need a favor." "No." "You didn't even hear what it is." "I don't need to." Ethan exhaled through his nose the way he always did when he was about to push harder. "I've got this thing tonight. A date." "Good for you." "Except it's not really a date. It's more like a setup by Mom." Daniel froze mid-wipe and looked at his brother. "Mom set you up?" "Yeah, with some woman she met at that charity thing last month. Apparently the woman's daughter is successful and accomplished, and looking for someone stable. So naturally she thought of you." "Hey," Ethan pointed at him with the half-eaten roll. "I'm stable. You're a bartender who lives in a studio above a Thai restaurant. That's called character." Daniel went back to wiping down the counter. "What's the favor?" Ethan hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "I need you to go instead of me." Daniel stopped, looked up, stared. "You're joking." "I'm not." "You want me to go on a blind date.
as you, not as me, as yourself.
Just in my place. That makes no sense. Look, Ethan leaned in, lowering his voice like they were planning a heist. Mom's been on my case for months. She thinks I'm wasting my life. If I blow this off, she's going to give me the lecture again, and I can't do it, Danny. I can't sit through another hour of, you have so much potential, and your father would want more for you. Daniel's jaw tightened. Don't. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying, and the answer's still no. Ethan straightened, crossing his arms. When's the last time you went out? I go out all the time. To the grocery store doesn't count. I don't have time for this. You never have time, that's the problem. Daniel set the rag down, harder than he meant to. I have a kid, Ethan, a bakery, bills, responsibilities. You know, all the things you avoid? Yeah, and you're miserable. The words landed heavier than they should have. Daniel didn't respond. He just turned and started restocking the pastry case, moving croissants from the tray to the shelf with stiff, deliberate motions. Ethan softened. I'm not saying you're doing a bad job. You're a great dad. The bakery's solid. But you're 32, man. You can't just stop living. I'm not stopping anything. When's the last time you did something for yourself? Daniel didn't answer. Ethan sighed. One dinner, 2 hours max. You meet her, you're polite, you leave. I'll owe you. You already owe me? Then I'll owe you more. Daniel closed the pastry case and turned around. He looked at his brother, really looked at him. Ethan was younger by 3 years, but somehow he'd always seemed older, looser, less weighed down. Their dad used to say Ethan had the easy gene, the one that let him float through life without the anchor the rest of them carried. Daniel had never been able to float. Why can't you just tell Mom the truth? Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because she wouldn't get it. You know how she is. She hears, I'm not interested, and she just pushes harder. But if you go, and it doesn't work out, she'll back off. She'll think I tried. That's manipulative. That's survival. Daniel exhaled slowly. He thought about the rest of his day. Mia's school pickup, homework, dinner, bath time, a few hours of prep work for tomorrow's bake, then sleep. Then the alarm at 4:47. He thought about the last time he'd sat across from someone who wasn't his daughter or a customer. He couldn't remember. Fine, he said. Ethan's face lit up. Seriously? One dinner, 2 hours? Then I'm out. Yes. Thank you. I swear I'll make this up to you. You won't. Probably not. But I'll try. Ethan grabbed his phone and started typing. Okay, it's at 7. Place called the Hartley. Downtown. She's expecting someone named Ethan Brooks, so just go with it. You want me to lie about my name? It's not lying, it's creative truth. Daniel gave him a look. Fine, it's lying, but it's harmless. You meet her, you have a conversation, you're honest about everything except your name, and then you leave. Easy. Nothing about this is easy. Details. Ethan grinned and clapped him on the shoulder. You're going to be great. Just be yourself. Well, not completely yourself. You're kind of intense. Maybe dial it back like 10%. Get out of my bakery. Love you too, big brother. Ethan left, still grinning, and Daniel stood there in the quiet hum of the ovens, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. So, the Hartley wasn't the kind of place Daniel would ever walk into on his own. It was all low lighting and dark wood, and people in clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He stood outside for a full minute, hands in his jacket pockets, debating whether it was too late to text Ethan and bail. It was. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hostess looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was lost. He probably looked it. Jeans, boots, a button-down he'd ironed 20 minutes ago in a panic. He didn't belong here. Reservation? She asked. Brooks. Ethan Brooks. She checked her tablet, nodded, and gestured toward the back. Right this way. He followed her through the maze of tables, past couples leaning in close, past a man in a suit laughing too loud at his own joke. The restaurant smelled like wine and something he couldn't place, something expensive. Then the hostess stopped and Daniel looked up. She was already there, sitting alone at a table by the window, one hand resting on the stem of a wine glass, her gaze somewhere out on the street. She was wearing a black dress, simple but sharp, and her dark hair was pulled back in a way that made her features look even more precise. She looked like someone who made decisions that changed lives. Daniel's first thought was that he'd made a mistake. His second thought was that she was the most striking woman he'd ever seen. She turned her head, and their eyes met. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she set her glass down and stood, and Daniel realized she was taller than he'd expected. Not tall, just present. Like she took up space without trying. "Ethan?" she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't waste words. Daniel opened his mouth, and the lie caught in his throat. He should have corrected her, should have explained, but instead he just nodded. "Yeah. Hi." She held out her hand. "Victoria Hale." He shook it. Her grip was firm, confident, the kind of handshake that said she'd spent a lot of time in rooms where she had to prove herself. "Daniel," he said. She paused. "I thought your name was Ethan." "It is. I mean," he stopped, took a breath. "Middle name, Daniel. I go by both." Smooth. Victoria studied him for a beat longer than was comfortable, then gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." He sat. She didn't. She stayed standing for a moment, looking at him like she was deciding something. Then she sat down, folded her hands on the table, and said, "You don't want to be here." Daniel blinked. "What?" "You don't want to be here," she repeated. "I can tell." It's fine. I don't particularly want to be here either." He didn't know what to say to that. Victoria picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip, her eyes never leaving his. "Let me guess. Your mother set this up." "My brother's mother, technically." "So you're not Ethan?" "No." "And you're here because—" Daniel exhaled. "Because my brother's an idiot, and I owe him too many favors." Victoria's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "Well," she said, setting her glass down, "at least you're honest. About some things. Most people aren't even that." The waiter appeared, hovering politely at the edge of the table. Daniel ordered a beer. Victoria ordered another glass of wine. When the waiter left, the silence stretched out between them, not quite awkward, but not comfortable either. "So," Daniel said, "you're successful and accomplished." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That's what they told you?" "Something like that." "And what do you do, Daniel, who's not Ethan?" "I run a bakery." She didn't react. Not in the way he expected. No polite surprise, no subtle disappointment. She just nodded. "What kind?" "Small. Family-owned, bread, pastries, nothing fancy." "Where?" "Southeast Portland, near Hawthorne." "I know the area." "You've been?" "I own a building there." Of course she did. The waiter returned with their drinks. Daniel took a long pull from his beer and tried not to think about how much it probably cost. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass. "You're probably wondering why I'm here." "Little bit." My assistant set it up. She thought I needed to get out more. Victoria said it like she was quoting someone she didn't fully respect. Apparently, working 80-hour weeks isn't considered a social life. Is it that bad? Worse. Then why do it? She looked at him, and for the first time something shifted in her expression, something harder. Because if I don't, someone else will, and they'll do it worse. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. Victoria's gaze drifted back to the window. "I started my company when I was 24. Bought out my first competitor at 26. By 30, I had more money than I knew what to do with and a reputation I didn't ask for." She paused. "Now I'm here, having dinner with a man who's pretending to be someone else because his brother didn't feel like showing up." Daniel winced. "When you put it like that, it's honest." "Yeah." She looked at him again, and this time there was something almost amused in her eyes. "Do you always let people push you around?" "Only family." "That's a terrible policy." "Tell me about it." This time she did smile. Just barely. But it was real. They ordered food. Daniel got something he couldn't pronounce. Victoria ordered a salad that looked like it cost more than his dinner, and the conversation shifted. Slowly, carefully. Like two people testing the ice before stepping on. She asked about the bakery. He told her about the early mornings, the regulars, the way his daughter liked to help by eating more dough than she shaped. He didn't mention that he was a single dad. Not yet. That felt like too much for a first conversation, even if it wasn't really a first date. She told him about her company, something in tech and real estate that he didn't fully understand but nodded along to anyway. She talked about board meetings, acquisitions, investors who thought they knew better. She didn't say it outright, but he got the sense that she spent most of her time fighting. "You ever get tired of it?" he asked. "Every day." "Then why not stop?" She looked at him like he'd just suggested she cut off her own arm. "Because it's mine. I built it. If I stop, I lose it. And I don't lose." There was something fierce in the way she said it. Something that made Daniel think she'd burned a lot of bridges to get where she was. They ate. They talked. The restaurant hummed around them. Laughter, clinking glasses, the low murmur of other people's lives. And for a little while, Daniel forgot he was supposed to be pretending. When the check came, Victoria reached for it before he could. "I've got it," she said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He didn't argue. They walked outside together into the cool night air. The city was alive. Cars, voices, the distant sound of a street musician's guitar. Daniel shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and looked at her. "So," he said, "that was weird?" "Very. But not terrible." She tilted her head, considering. "No, not terrible." They stood there for a moment, and Daniel had the strangest feeling that he should say something else, something more. But before he could figure out what, Victoria turned to leave. "Wait," he said. She stopped. "I lied earlier about my name. It's Daniel, just Daniel, not Ethan." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and then she nodded. "I know." "You knew?" "I figured it out about 10 minutes in." "And you didn't say anything?" "I wanted to see if you would." Daniel didn't know whether to laugh or feel embarrassed. He settled for both. "Good night, Daniel," Victoria said. And then she was gone, disappearing into a black car that pulled up like it had been waiting for her all along. Daniel stood there on the sidewalk watching the taillights fade, and thought about the way she'd said his name, like she'd already decided it mattered. Eek. 3 days later, she walked into his bakery. Daniel was elbow-deep in dough, working a batch of sourdough that had been proofing since 5 that morning when the bell above the door chimed. He didn't look up right away. He was in the rhythm. Fold, turn, rest. Fold, turn, rest. "Be with you in a sec," he called. "Take your time." He froze. That voice. He looked up, and there she was, Victoria Hale, standing in the middle of his bakery in a tailored coat and heels that clicked softly on the worn tile floor. She looked completely out of place and somehow exactly where she was supposed to be. "Hi," she said. Daniel stared. "You're here." "I am." "Why?" She walked up to the counter, glancing around at the chalkboard menu, the baskets of bread, the handwritten labels in his dad's blocky writing that he'd never had the heart to replace. "I was in the area," she said. "You own a building in the area." "True." "So you weren't just passing by?" "No." She met his eyes, and there was something almost playful in her expression. Not quite a challenge, but close. "I wanted to see where you worked," she said. Daniel wiped his hands on his apron and came around the counter. "It's not much." "It's yours." "Yeah." She picked up a baguette from the display, turning it over in her hands like she was inspecting it. "Can I buy this?" "You don't have to buy it." I'm buying it." He rang her up. She paid in cash. And then she didn't leave. She stood there holding the bread, looking at him like she was waiting for something. "Did you need anything else?" he asked. "No." "Okay." She still didn't leave. Daniel shifted his weight, feeling suddenly aware of the flour on his shirt, the fact that he probably smelled like yeast and sweat. "Look," he said, "I don't really know what's happening here." "Neither do I." "But if you want to sit down, there's a table by the window." Victoria glanced over, then back at him. "You have time?" "I can make time." She sat. He made her a coffee, black, no sugar, which she drank without comment, and sat down across from her. The bakery was quiet. Mid-morning lull. The rush was over and the lunch crowd hadn't started yet. "So," he said, "you came all the way here to buy bread?" "I came to see if you were real." "Real?" "Most people aren't. They're performances. Versions of themselves they think I want to see." "And I'm not?" "You told me your name was Ethan and then immediately regretted it. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't ask what I was worth. You just talked." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Victoria took a sip of her coffee, her gaze steady on him. "I liked it." "So you came back?" "So I came back." They sat there for a while, talking about nothing important. She asked about the bakery's history. He told her about his dad, the way the old man used to let him stand on a stool and shape baguettes when he was barely tall enough to reach the counter. She told him about growing up in a house where ambition was the only currency that mattered. It was easy, easier than it should have been. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the door. "I'll probably come back," she said. "Why?" "Because the coffee's good." Daniel smiled. "It's just regular coffee." "Maybe." She looked at him one more time, and there was something softer in her expression, something almost uncertain. "Or maybe it's the company." And then she left. Daniel sat there for a long time after she was gone, staring at the empty cup she'd left behind. He didn't know what this was, but he knew it wasn't over. She came back 2 days later, then again at the end of the week, then twice the following week. It became a pattern, a ritual. Every few days, usually mid-morning, Victoria would walk in, order a coffee, and sit at the same table by the window. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes she brought work, her laptop open, fingers moving fast across the keys while Daniel worked the counter. He didn't ask why she kept coming. He wasn't sure he wanted to know, but he started looking forward to it. The regulars noticed. Old Man Cho raised an eyebrow when Victoria walked past him one morning. The yoga mat woman whispered something to her friend, who glanced over and smirked. Daniel ignored all of it. Mia noticed too. "Who's that?" she asked one Saturday morning, peering out from behind the counter. Daniel looked up. Victoria was at her usual table, scrolling through her phone. "A friend," he said. "She's pretty." "Mia." "What? She is." Victoria glanced over, and Mia waved. Victoria, to her credit, waved back. Later, when the bakery was empty, Victoria came up to the counter. "She's yours?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Mia, she's 6. She looks like you." "People say that." Victoria didn't ask about Mia's mother. Daniel didn't offer. It was an unspoken boundary, one he wasn't ready to cross. But he could feel it shifting. One afternoon, Victoria stayed late. The bakery was closed, and Daniel was cleaning up, wiping down tables and sweeping flour from the floor. She offered to help. He told her she didn't have to. She did it anyway. They worked in silence, and when they were done, they sat at the counter with leftover pastries and talked until the streetlights came on outside. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure." "Why haven't you asked me out?" Daniel stopped mid-bite. "What?" "I've been coming here for weeks. You have to know that's not normal." He set the croissant down, suddenly very aware of how close she was sitting. "I didn't want to assume." "Assume what?" "That you'd want that. From someone like me." Victoria's expression shifted. Not anger, something sharper. "Someone like you," she repeated. "Yeah. A single dad who runs a bakery and drives a 10-year-old van." He flinched. "When you put it like that, you think that matters to me? Doesn't it?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, and he couldn't tell what she was thinking. "I spend most of my time with people who care about 2 things," she said finally. "Money and power. They don't care about me. They care about what I can do for them. You don't. You never have. So no, Daniel, it doesn't matter." He didn't know what to say. Victoria stood, gathering her coat and bag. "I should go." "Wait." She stopped. "I do want to," he said. "Ask you out. I just didn't think you'd say yes." She looked at him for a long moment, and then she smiled. Not the polite, controlled smile she wore like armor, a real one. "Try me," she said, and then she left. Daniel sat there in the empty bakery, heart pounding, and realized he'd just been given a chance he hadn't expected. He wasn't going to waste it. He asked her to dinner the next day. Not at the Hartley, not anywhere that required reservations or a dress code. Just a small Italian place 3 blocks from the bakery, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles and a menu that hadn't changed in 20 years. Victoria said yes without hesitation. They met at 7. Daniel showed up 5 minutes early, which meant he spent those 5 minutes standing outside trying to remember how to act like a normal person. He dropped Mia off at his mother's house, endured 20 minutes of questions he didn't have answers to, and driven downtown with his hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. When Victoria arrived, she was wearing jeans. He'd never seen her in jeans before. She looked different, younger maybe, less like someone who ran a company and more like someone who might actually want to be here. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They went inside. The restaurant was warm and loud in the way family places always are. Voices overlapping, dishes clattering, someone's kid crying in the corner. The hostess sat them at a table near the back, and Daniel immediately felt like he could breathe again. Victoria looked around, taking it in. "This is nice." "It's nothing fancy." "I didn't want fancy." They ordered wine. Red for her, beer for him, because he still couldn't bring himself to pretend he was someone who knew anything about wine. The waiter brought bread, and they both reached for it at the same time, hands brushing. Victoria pulled back first, smiling a little. "Sorry," Daniel said. "Don't be." They ate. They talked, and for the first time since the night at the Hartley, Daniel felt like they were actually on a date. Not 2 people testing the waters, just 2 people who wanted to be there. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said, twirling pasta on her fork. "Sure." What happened with Mia's mother? There it was, the question he'd been waiting for. Daniel set his fork down and took a drink of his beer, buying himself a few seconds. "She left when Mia was 2. Victoria didn't say anything. She just waited. "We weren't married," Daniel continued. "We were young. I was 24, she was 23. We weren't ready for a kid, but it happened anyway, and we tried to make it work. For a while it did, then it didn't." "But she just left?" "She said she couldn't do it anymore. The diapers, the sleepless nights, the fact that her whole life had become this one thing she didn't choose. She wanted out, so she left." "Does she see Mia?" "Birthdays, Christmas. Sometimes." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She sends checks, calls every few months, but she's not a mom. Not really." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. "That's hard." "Yeah." "For you or for Mia?" "Both." She nodded slowly, and Daniel had the feeling she understood more than she was saying. "What about you?" he asked. "Ever been married?" "No." "Ever come close?" Victoria paused, her fork hovering over her plate. "Once. A long time ago, before the company took off." "What happened?" "He wanted me to choose. Him or the business." She set her fork down. "I chose the business." "Do you regret it?" "No." She said it without hesitation. "He wanted someone who would shrink to fit his life. I wasn't that person. I'm still not." Daniel nodded. He got that. He'd spent most of his 20s trying to be the person everyone else needed him to be, his father's successor, Mia's father, the responsible brother. It had taken him a long time to realize that trying to fit into boxes other people built for you was the fastest way to suffocate. "So we're both carrying baggage," he said. "Seems like it. You okay with that?" Victoria looked at him, and for the first time all night she seemed uncertain. "I don't know. Are you?" Daniel thought about it, about the early mornings and the late nights, and the fact that his life wasn't simple and probably never would be, about the woman sitting across from him, who had her own complications, her own walls. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." She smiled. Not the polite version, the real one. They finished dinner and walked outside into the cool night air. The city was quieter now, the rush of the day fading into something softer. They walked side by side, not quite touching, and Daniel found himself hyper-aware of the space between them. "Can I ask you something else?" Victoria said. "You're full of questions tonight. I'm curious." "About what?" "Why you do it." "Do what?" "The bakery, the early mornings, the grind. You could sell it. Do something easier." Daniel stopped walking. It's not about easy. Then what's it about? He looked at her, trying to find the right words. It's the only thing I have that's mine. My dad built it. Yeah, but I'm the one keeping it alive. Every loaf, every pastry, every customer who comes back because they trust what I make. That's mine. And Mia gets to grow up seeing that, seeing what it looks like to build something with your hands and not give up on it. Victoria didn't say anything for a moment. Then she nodded. I get that. Do you? Yeah, it's the same reason I can't walk away from my company even when it's killing me. Because it's mine. And if I let it go, I'm admitting I wasn't strong enough to keep it. Daniel understood that more than he wanted to admit. They started walking again, slower this time. When they reached her car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than his entire year's salary, Victoria turned to face him. I had a good time, she said. Me too. Can we do this again? Yeah, I'd like that. She smiled, and then she did something he didn't expect. She stepped closer, rose up on her toes, and kissed him. Just once. Soft and quick, and over before he had time to process it. When she pulled back, she looked almost shy. Good night, Daniel. Good night. He watched her drive away, and when her taillights disappeared around the corner, he stood there on the sidewalk for a long time, feeling like something fundamental had just shifted. The next few weeks blurred together in a way that felt both fast and slow. Victoria kept coming to the bakery. They went out again. Then again. They fell into a rhythm that felt easy even when it wasn't. She met Mia properly on a Saturday afternoon. Daniel hadn't planned it, but Mia had insisted on coming to the bakery that day, and when Victoria walked in, there was no avoiding it. Mia stared at her with the kind of blunt curiosity only 6-year-olds could pull off. Are you my dad's girlfriend? Daniel choked on his coffee. Victoria, to her credit, didn't miss a beat. I'm his friend. But you come here a lot. I do. Why? Because I like the coffee. Mia looked skeptical. It's just normal coffee. Victoria glanced at Daniel, her mouth twitching. That's what your dad said. So why do you really come here? Victoria crouched down so she was at Mia's eye level. Because your dad's interesting, and I don't meet a lot of interesting people. Mia seemed to consider this. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. Okay, do you want to help me decorate cookies? I don't know how. I can teach you. And just like that, Victoria Hale, billionaire CEO, one of the most powerful women in the city, spent an hour in the back of a small bakery decorating sugar cookies with a 6-year-old who had very strong opinions about the correct ratio of frosting to sprinkles. Daniel watched from the counter, and he couldn't remember the last time something had felt this right. But it wasn't all easy. His mother called a week later, her voice tight with the kind of concern that always came wrapped in judgment. Ethan told me you've been seeing someone. Daniel sighed. Of course Ethan had told her. Yeah. Her name's Victoria. Victoria Hale. He should have known she'd recognize the name. His mother followed the business news the way some people followed sports. Yeah. There was a pause. Daniel, do you know who she is? I know who she is, Mom. She's a billionaire. I'm aware. And you're a baker, I know. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be realistic. People like her don't end up with people like us. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. People like us. You know what I mean. Yeah, I do. I just don't want you to get hurt. I'm a grown man. I can handle myself. His mother sighed, and he could picture her in her kitchen, leaning against the counter with that worried look she'd perfected over the years. Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. I will. But after he hung up, her words stayed with him. People like her don't end up with people like us. He hated that she'd said it, hated it more because part of him wondered if she was right. Victoria noticed something was off the next time she came by. She didn't ask right away. She just sat at her usual table, watching him work, until the bakery emptied out and it was just the two of them. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. Daniel. He stopped wiping down the counter and looked at her. My mom thinks this is a bad idea. This? Us. You and me. She thinks we're too different. Victoria's expression didn't change. What do you think? I think she might be right. The words came out harsher than he meant them to, and he saw something flicker across Victoria's face. Not hurt, exactly. something harder. You want to end this? She asked. No, I don't know, He exhaled, frustrated. You've got this whole life I'm not part of. Boardrooms and investors and buildings with your name on them, and I've got flour under my fingernails and a kid who needs me home by 8 every night. How is that supposed to work? Victoria stood and came around the counter, stopping a few feet away from him. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I haven't been asking myself the same question? And what's your answer? I don't have one, but I know I don't want to walk away just because it's complicated. What if it's more than complicated? Then we figure it out. Daniel looked at her, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. The kind she usually kept locked down tight. I'm scared, he admitted, of screwing this up, of dragging you into my mess, of not being enough. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and clean. You think I'm not scared? I've spent the last 10 years building walls so high nobody could get close. And then you showed up in a restaurant you didn't want to be at, told me your name was Ethan, and made me laugh for the first time in months. You think that's not terrifying? Victoria, I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be honest. And if this is too much, if you can't do this, then tell me now. But don't push me away because you're afraid. Daniel stared at her, his heart hammering in his chest, and then he kissed her. It wasn't soft or tentative, it was desperate and clumsy and real. She kissed him back just as hard, her hands gripping the front of his shirt, and for a moment, everything else fell away. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I'm not pushing you away, Daniel said. I'm just trying to be realistic. Realistic is overrated. He laughed, and some of the tension in his chest loosened. They stood there for a while, foreheads touching, and Daniel thought about what it meant to let someone in, to trust that maybe, just maybe, this could work. But the doubts didn't disappear. They just got quieter. A few days later, Daniel met one of Victoria's colleagues. It wasn't planned. He'd been downtown picking up supplies when Victoria called and asked if he wanted to grab lunch. He said yes, and she said she was with a client and would meet him in 10 minutes. The client turned out to be a man in his 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's van. His name was Richard, and he had the kind of handshake that felt like a test. So you're the baker, Richard said, like it was a job title he'd never heard before. That's me, Daniel said. They sat down at a cafe, and Richard spent the next 20 minutes talking about quarterly projections and market trends and a dozen other things Daniel didn't understand. Victoria listened with the kind of focus that made it clear she was 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Daniel felt like furniture. When Richard finally left, Victoria turned to him. Sorry about that, he talks a lot. It's fine. You sure? You got quiet. I just didn't have much to contribute. You don't have to contribute. You can just be here. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He was just there, a spectator in her world. Do you ever get tired of it? He asked. Of what? All of it. The meetings, the deals, the people who only care about what you can do for them. Victoria looked at him, and for a moment she seemed exhausted. Every single day? Then why not stop? Because if I stop, I lose. And I don't lose. It was the same answer she'd given him before, and Daniel was starting to realize it wasn't just about the company. It was about proving something. To herself, to the world, to everyone who'd ever doubted her. He understood that. But he also wondered what it cost her. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel sat on the couch with a beer he didn't really want and thought about the conversation at the cafe, about the way Richard had looked at him like he was a curiosity, about the way Victoria had fit so seamlessly into that world while he'd felt like an outsider. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. You okay? He stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Yeah, just tired. Want to talk? Not tonight. There was a pause, then, okay, call me if you change your mind. He didn't call. The next few days were busy. A catering order for a wedding, a busted oven that needed replacing, Mia coming down with a cold that kept her home from school. Daniel threw himself into work. And if he was being honest, he was grateful for the distraction. Victoria noticed. She always noticed. You're avoiding me, she said when she came by the bakery later that week. I'm not. Daniel. He stopped kneading dough and looked at her. I'm not avoiding you. I'm just busy.
Too busy to text me back?
He didn't have a good answer for that. Victoria crossed her arms, and he could see the frustration in her eyes. If this isn't working for you, just say it. It's not that. Then what is it? Daniel wiped his hands on his apron and came around the counter. I don't fit into your life. You know that, right? That's not true. It is. I saw it the other day. Your colleague, Richard. He looked at me like I was some kind of novelty. And the thing is, I get it. Because I am. I'm the guy who makes bread while you close million-dollar deals. I'm the single dad who can't stay out past 9 because I've got a kid at home. I'm not… Stop, Victoria said, her voice sharp. Just stop. Daniel stopped. She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. You think I care what Richard thinks? You think I care what any of them think? I've spent my entire life being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, tough enough, and I proved them all wrong. But you know what? It didn't make me happy. It just made me successful. There's a difference. Victoria, I don't need you to fit into my life. I need you to remind me that there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. You do that. You and Mia. So don't tell me you're not enough when you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm more than just my company. Daniel stared at her, his chest tight.
I'm scared too, Victoria said, her voice softer now.
I'm scared of letting someone in and having them realize I'm not as strong as everyone thinks. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared of wanting something I can't control. But I'm more scared of losing you because we were both too afraid to try. Daniel didn't know what to say, so he kissed her instead. This time it was softer, slower, like a promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. We're going to mess this up sometimes. Probably. But we'll figure it out. Yeah. She smiled and Daniel felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty, just hope. Over the next few weeks, they started finding a rhythm. Victoria came by the bakery less often, but when she did, it meant more. They had dinner at his place one night, and Mia insisted on showing Victoria her entire collection of stuffed animals, narrating each one's backstory with the kind of detail only a 6-year-old could muster. Victoria listened to all of it. She asked questions. She made Mia laugh. And when Mia finally went to bed, Victoria sat on Daniel's couch with a glass of wine and said, She's great. She is. She likes you, Daniel added. That's rare. She doesn't usually warm up to people this fast.
I like her too.
They sat in silence for a while, and Daniel felt the weight of everything they weren't saying. The fact that this was getting serious, the fact that Mia was part of the equation now, the fact that if this fell apart, it would hurt more than just the two of them. I don't know how to do this, Daniel admitted. Do what? Date someone when I've got a kid. I haven't done it since, well, ever. Victoria looked at him. You're doing fine. Am I? Yeah, you're letting me in. That's more than most people do. Daniel wanted to believe her. He was trying to believe her. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and Mia was asleep, the doubts crept back in. He'd lie awake and think about all the ways this could go wrong, about what would happen when Victoria got tired of his small world, about what would happen if Mia got attached and then Victoria left. He didn't tell Victoria about the doubts. He just carried them. And for a while that was enough. But then his brother showed up. Ethan walked into the bakery on a Tuesday morning, looking sheepish. Hey. Daniel didn't look up from the register. What do you want? I heard you're dating Victoria Hale. And I wanted to say congratulations. You already said that on the phone 2 weeks ago. I know, but I also wanted to say I'm sorry. That got Daniel's attention. He looked up. For what? For pushing you into that blind date. I didn't expect you to actually hit it off. And now it's this whole thing, and Mom's freaking out, and I feel like it's my fault. Daniel set down the rag he'd been using to wipe the counter. You want me to break up with her because Mom's uncomfortable? No, Ethan sighed. I don't know, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm fine. Are you? Daniel didn't answer right away, because the truth was, he didn't know. He was happy. He was also terrified, and he wasn't sure how to reconcile the two. I'm figuring it out, he said finally. Ethan nodded. For what it's worth, I think she's good for you. You've been different since you met her. Less stuck. I wasn't stuck. You kind of were. Daniel wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because maybe Ethan was right. Maybe he had been stuck, going through the motions, too afraid to want anything more than what he already had. And maybe Victoria had unstuck him. That night, Victoria texted him. Can I see you? He almost said no. He was tired, and Mia had homework, and he had an early morning ahead of him. But something in the message felt urgent. Yeah, come by after 8. She showed up at 8:15, and the moment he opened the door, he knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked. Victoria walked past him into the apartment, her movements tense. I had a board meeting today. And they're pushing me to step back. Daniel closed the door. Step back from what? From everything. The company? The day-to-day. They think I'm spread too thin. They think I'm distracted. Are you? She turned to face him, and he saw the anger in her eyes. Yes, and I don't care. Victoria, they don't get it. They think I'm losing focus because I've been spending time with you. But the truth is, I've been more focused than I've been in years. Because for the first time, I have something outside of work that matters. And that's making me better, not worse. Daniel didn't know what to say. Victoria sat down on the couch, her head in her hands. I built that company from nothing. I fought for every inch of it. And now they want to take it away because I finally have a life. He sat down next to her. What did you tell them? I told them to go to hell. Daniel couldn't help it. He laughed. Victoria looked at him, surprised. What? Nothing, He shook his head. You're incredible. You know that? I don't feel incredible. I feel angry. You're allowed to be angry. She leaned back against the couch, exhausted. I don't know what to do. You'll figure it out. You always do. What if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together. Victoria looked at him, and something in her expression softened. You really mean that? Yeah, I do. She reached for his hand, and he took it, their fingers threading together. They sat there in this quiet of his small apartment, and Daniel realized something. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about building something together, something that could hold the weight of both their lives. It wouldn't be easy. But maybe it didn't have to be. The next morning, Daniel woke to his alarm and found Victoria still asleep on his couch, curled under the blanket he'd given her sometime around midnight. She looked different like this, softer, unguarded, her face relaxed in a way he rarely saw when she was awake. He stood there for a moment, coffee mug in hand, and wondered how they'd gotten here so fast. Mia padded into the living room in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She stopped when she saw Victoria. Is she staying for breakfast? Mia whispered. I don't know, Daniel whispered back. Probably not. She's got work. Can we make pancakes anyway? Yeah, we can make pancakes. They moved quietly into the kitchen, and Daniel started pulling out ingredients while Mia climbed onto her stool at the counter. She was cracking eggs into a bowl, getting more shell than yolk, but he didn't correct her, when Victoria appeared in the doorway. Morning, she said, her voice rough with sleep. Morning, Daniel said. Coffee? Please. He poured her a cup, and she took it with both hands, leaning against the counter. She looked rumpled and tired, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and somehow that made her more beautiful. We're making pancakes, Mia announced. Do you want some? Victoria glanced at Daniel, and he nodded. Stay, if you want. She stayed. They ate breakfast at the small table by the window, Mia chattering about school, and a friend who'd brought a lizard for show and tell. Victoria listened, asked questions, and Daniel watched the two of them and felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Something that felt a lot like hope. After breakfast, Victoria left to go home and change before heading to her office. Daniel walked her to the door, and she paused with her hand on the knob. Thank you, she said, for last night. You don't have to thank me. I do. I don't. She stopped, searching for words. I don't let people see me like that, falling apart. You weren't falling apart. You were just tired. Same thing sometimes. He kissed her forehead, and she leaned into it for a moment before pulling away. I'll call you later, she said. Okay. But she didn't call. Not that day, or the next. Daniel told himself she was busy, that the board meeting had probably created a mountain of work she needed to dig through. He told himself not to worry. He worried anyway. On the third day, she finally texted, "Can we talk?" His stomach dropped. Nothing good ever followed those words. They met at a park near the bakery, one of those in-between spaces that wasn't quite downtown and wasn't quite residential. Victoria was already there when he arrived, sitting on a bench with her coat pulled tight against the cold. "Hey," he said, sitting down beside her. "Hey." She didn't look at him, just stared straight ahead, and Daniel felt the dread settling deeper. "What's going on?" he asked. Victoria took a breath. "The board voted. They want me to take a leave of absence." "What? They can't do that?" "They can. And they did." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "They said I'm compromised, that my judgment's being off, that I need to step back and let someone else handle operations for a while." "That's insane." "Maybe, but they have the votes, and I don't. So either I take the leave or they force me out entirely." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "This is because of me. It's because of them. Because they can't handle the idea that I might have priorities outside of making them richer." "Victoria, I'm not taking the leave." She finally turned to look at him, and her eyes were hard. "I'm going to fight this, but it's going to get ugly. They're going to dig into my life. They're going to look for weaknesses, and you're going to be part of that." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to be ready. For people asking questions. For your name showing up in places you don't want it. For this to get complicated." "I don't care about that." "You should. You have Mia to think about." And there it was. The thing he'd been trying not to think about. The fact that this wasn't just about him anymore. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Victoria looked away again. "I don't know. I just needed you to know what's coming." They sat in silence for a while, the cold seeping through Daniel's jacket. He wanted to reach for her hand, but something stopped him. A distance that hadn't been there before. "Are you breaking up with me?" he asked. "No, I don't want to. But I'd understand if you wanted to walk away." "I don't." "You might, once this gets worse." Daniel turned to face her fully. "I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? Whatever they throw at you, we'll deal with it." Victoria's jaw tightened, and for a second he thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay." But when he left the park that day, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had shifted. Not broken, just strained. The article came out a week later, not front page, but prominent enough. Tech CEO's mystery man, who is Daniel Brooks? The photo was grainy, taken from across the street. Him and Victoria leaving a restaurant, his hand on the small of her back. The article itself was mostly speculation, but it painted him exactly the way he'd feared. The small-town baker dating above his station. The single dad who'd somehow caught the attention of one of the most powerful women in the city. His phone started ringing before he'd even finished reading. First his mother, then Ethan. Then two reporters who'd somehow gotten his number. He ignored all of them. When he got to the bakery, Old Man Cho was waiting outside with a newspaper in his hand. "You famous now?" Cho asked. "No." "Paper says you are." "Paper's wrong." Cho shrugged and went inside. The day was brutal. Customers who'd never said more than their order suddenly had questions. Someone took a photo of him through the window. A woman he didn't recognize came in and asked if Victoria was really as cold as everyone said. Daniel told her to leave. By the time he locked up, he was exhausted and angry, not at Victoria, at the world that thought it had a right to their lives. Victoria called that night. "Did you see it?" "Yeah." "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault." "It kind of is." Daniel sat down on the couch, rubbing his eyes. "What do we do now?" "We ignore it. Eventually they'll get bored and move on." "You really believe that?" She hesitated. "No, but I don't know what else to say." Mia came out of her room, rubbing her eyes. "Who are you talking to?" "Victoria," Daniel said. "Can I say hi?" He handed her the phone, and Mia climbed onto the couch beside him, pressing the phone to her ear. "Hi, Victoria. Are you coming over soon? Dad's been grumpy all day." Daniel could hear Victoria's laugh through the speaker. They talked for a few minutes, Mia's chatter filling the silence, And when she finally handed the phone back, Victoria's voice was softer. "She's good for you," Victoria said. "Yeah, she is. I miss you. I miss you too. Can I see you this weekend?" Daniel thought about the reporters, the stares, the way his life had become something people gossiped about. He thought about Mia and what it would mean if this kept escalating. "Yeah," he said. "Come over Saturday. We'll figure it out." Saturday came and Victoria showed up with groceries. Not takeout or something expensive, actual groceries. Pasta, sauce, vegetables, a loaf of bread that definitely wasn't from his bakery. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "Dinner. I'm cooking." "You cook?" "I can follow a recipe. Don't look so shocked." Mia thought it was hilarious. She sat at the counter watching Victoria navigate the kitchen with the kind of cautious precision someone uses when they're out of their depth. "You're holding the knife wrong," Mia said. "I'm holding it fine." "No, like this," Mia demonstrated with her hands. "My dad taught me." Victoria adjusted her grip, and Daniel bit back a smile. They made pasta. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and marinara with too much garlic because Mia insisted garlic made everything better. They ate at the table, and for a little while, it felt normal. Like they were just three people sharing a meal, not a billionaire and a baker and the kid caught in the middle. After dinner, Mia dragged Victoria to her room to show her a puzzle she'd been working on. Daniel cleaned up, listening to their voices drift down the hallway, and tried to ignore the knot in his chest. When Victoria came back, she looked tired. "She's got energy." "Yeah, sorry about that." "Don't be. She's great." Victoria leaned against the counter. "You're lucky." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, keeping her, raising her alone?" The question caught him off guard. "No, never. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, she's the best thing I ever did." He looked at Victoria. "Why are you asking?" She shrugged, but there was something vulnerable in the gesture. "I don't know. I've spent my whole life building things. Companies, buildings, portfolios. But I've never built a family. And sometimes I wonder if I missed something important." Daniel crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her. "You didn't miss it. It's not too late. Isn't it?" "No." She looked up at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes. The same fear he carried every day, that he wasn't enough, that he'd fail, that everything he cared about could fall apart. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Neither do I. But we're doing it anyway." She kissed him then, and it felt like a promise neither of them was sure they could keep. The next few weeks were a test. The press attention didn't die down. It got worse. More articles, more photos, more people speculating about their relationship. Victoria's board stepped up their pressure, leaking information to the media about internal disputes. Daniel's mother called every other day, her worry barely masked as advice. And through it all, they tried to hold on. But the cracks were starting to show. Daniel snapped at a customer who asked too many personal questions. Victoria missed Mia's school play because of an emergency board meeting. They had their first real fight on a Tuesday night, voices raised in his apartment while Mia pretended not to hear from her room. "You're not listening to me," Victoria said, her frustration spilling over. "I am listening. You're just not hearing what I'm saying." "Which is what? That I'm not doing enough? That I'm failing at this?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. "I'm just saying that Mia needed you there. She asked about you 3 times before the play started. And I wanted to be there. But I can't just walk away from my company every time something comes up. I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to make her a priority." "She is a priority. But so is my job. So is keeping the board from tearing apart everything I've built. And where do I fit in all that?" The question hung between them, sharp and ugly. Victoria's expression hardened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? Because right now it feels like we're at the bottom of your list." "You're not—" She stopped, closing her eyes. "I'm doing the best I can." "I know, but maybe your best isn't enough." He regretted the words the moment they left his mouth. Victoria's face went blank, the walls slamming back into place. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Victoria, I didn't mean I should go. Don't, please." But she was already grabbing her coat, already heading for the door, and Daniel stood there, frozen, watching her leave and hating himself for letting her. She didn't come by the bakery the next day, or the day after. Daniel texted her, called her, but she didn't respond. He told himself she needed space, that she'd come around, but the silence stretched on. Mia noticed. "Where's Victoria?" "She's busy, sweetie." "Is she mad at you?" "I don't know." "You should say sorry." "It's not that simple." "It is. You just say sorry and mean it. That's what you always tell me." Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. A week later, Ethan showed up at the bakery. "You look like hell." "Thanks." "Have you talked to her?" "She's not talking to me." "Have you tried harder?" Daniel gave him a look. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" "Mom's worried. She thinks you're going to do something stupid." "Like what?" "Like give up. She says you do that sometimes when things get hard." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't give up." "Then prove it. Go see her. Fix this." "It's not that easy." "Nothing worth having is." Daniel wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because Ethan was right, and so was Mia. And somewhere deep down, Daniel knew what he had to do. He just didn't know if it would work. The next day, he closed the bakery early. He drove downtown to the building Victoria owned, the one with her name on a bronze plaque outside. He'd never been inside before. It was all glass and steel and security guards who looked at him like he didn't belong. "I'm here to see Victoria Hale," he told the receptionist. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then I'm afraid, tell her it's Daniel Brooks. Tell her I'm not leaving until she sees me." The receptionist looked skeptical, but she picked up the phone. A few minutes later, she nodded. 47th floor. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, he stepped into a space that was all white walls and minimalist furniture. A woman in a sharp suit met him. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Allison, Miss Hale's assistant. She's in a meeting, but she asked you to wait." He waited. 20 minutes, 40, an hour. When Victoria finally appeared, she looked exhausted. Her suit was perfect, her hair was perfect, but her eyes betrayed her. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I needed to see you." "I'm working." "I know, but I had to say this in person." He took a breath. "I'm sorry for what I said, for making you feel like you weren't enough. You are. You're more than enough." Victoria's expression didn't change. "You were right, though. I am failing at this. I can't balance everything. Something always suffers." "Then let me help." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together. Isn't that what you told me?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to believe him fighting with the part that had been hurt too many times before. "I can't keep disappointing you," she said quietly. "Or Mia. You're not disappointing us. You're trying, that's all anyone can do." "What if trying isn't enough? Then we try harder." Victoria's eyes welled up, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold it back. But a tear escaped anyway, sliding down her cheek. Daniel stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, her face pressed into his shoulder. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I know. I don't know how to do this. We'll figure it out. I promise." They stood there in the empty hallway, holding each other, and Daniel felt the shift again. Not breaking, healing. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "I just cried in front of my assistant." "Pretty sure she's seen worse." "Probably." Victoria took his hand. "Come on, let me show you my office." Her office was on the corner, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful and intimidating and completely Victoria. "This is where you spend all your time?" Daniel asked. "Most of it." "No wonder you're tired." She smiled. "It's not so bad, usually." They sat on the couch by the window, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt like they were okay. Not perfect, but okay. "I want to make this work," Victoria said, "but I need you to be patient with me. I'm not good at this." "Neither am I." "Then we're a mess." "Yeah, but we're a mess together." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there watching the city below, two people trying to build something neither of them quite knew how to hold. The weeks that followed weren't easy, but they were honest. Victoria started showing up at the bakery before her morning meetings, sitting at the counter with her laptop while Daniel prepped for the day. She'd work through emails while he shaped croissants, and sometimes they wouldn't say more than a few words to each other. But the silence felt different now. Comfortable. Like they'd found a rhythm that worked. Mia warmed up to it too. She'd wake up some mornings to find Victoria already there, and she'd climb onto the stool beside her, chattering about dreams or school, while Victoria listened with the kind of attention most adults couldn't manage before coffee. "You're good with her," Daniel said one morning after Mia had gone to brush her teeth. Victoria looked up from her laptop. "She makes it easy. Still, not everyone would put in the effort. She's important to you. That makes her important to me." It was a simple statement, but it hit Daniel harder than he expected, because Victoria meant it. He could see it in the way she remembered Mia's favorite breakfast, the way she asked about school projects, the way she'd started keeping hair ties in her bag just in case. But the board situation hadn't improved. If anything, it had gotten worse. Victoria was fighting battles on multiple fronts: internal resistance, media scrutiny, investors who thought she'd lost her edge. She came home exhausted most nights, the kind of tired that went bone deep. Daniel saw it wearing on her. "You need to take a break," he said one evening. They were at his apartment, Mia already asleep, and Victoria was on her third glass of wine. "I can't. You're going to burn out. I've been burning out for 10 years. I'm used to it. That's not something to be proud of." She set her glass down harder than she meant to. "What do you want me to do, Daniel? Walk away? Let them win? I want you to take care of yourself. This is how I take care of myself. By fighting. By not giving up. Even if it kills you? It's not going to kill me." "You sure about that?" Victoria stood, pacing to the window. "You don't understand. If I stop, if I show any weakness, they'll tear me apart. That's how this works. You don't get to be soft in my world. I'm not asking you to be soft. I'm asking you to be human." She turned to look at him, and there was something raw in her expression. "I don't know if I remember how." Daniel crossed the room and put his hands on her shoulders. "Then let me remind you." She leaned into him, and he felt the tension in her body slowly release. They stood there for a long time, and Daniel wondered how someone so strong could feel so fragile. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Victoria had been in back-to-back meetings all day, fighting off another attempt by the board to sideline her. She'd won, barely, but it had cost her. When she showed up at the bakery that evening, she looked hollowed out. "I need to tell you something," she said. Daniel locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. "What happened?" "They offered me a deal. Step down as CEO, take a chairman position, and they'll stop fighting me. I'd still have influence, but I wouldn't be running day-to-day operations." "What did you say?" "I told them I'd think about it." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Are you actually considering it?" "I don't know. Maybe." She sat down at one of the tables, her shoulders sagging. "I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of fighting. And part of me wonders if they're right. If I've been so focused on winning that I've forgotten what I'm actually fighting for." "So take the deal." She looked up, surprised. "What?" "If you're that tired, if it's making you this miserable, then take the deal. Step back. Do something else." "I can't just walk away from my company." "Why not? You built it. You proved you could do it. Now maybe it's time to prove you can let it go." Victoria stared at him like he'd suggested she cut off her own arm. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do. I'm asking you to choose yourself, for once. And what would I do? If I'm not running the company, who am I?" "You'd be Victoria, the woman I fell in love with, the woman who makes my daughter laugh, the woman who's more than just her job." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel hadn't meant to say it like that, hadn't meant to say it at all yet. But there it was. Victoria's eyes widened. "You love me?" "Yeah, I do." She didn't say it back. She just sat there, processing, and Daniel felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "I've never had anyone say that to me before," she said quietly. "Not like that. Not and mean it." "I mean it. I know." She stood and came over to him, taking his hands in hers. "I don't know if I'm ready to say it back. Not because I don't feel it, but because I'm scared of what it means." "That's okay. Is it?" Yeah, we've got time. She kissed him, and it felt different this time. Less desperate, more deliberate. Like a choice she was making instead of something she was falling into. When they pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. I'm going to take the deal. You sure? No. But I think you're right. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not fighting all the time. Daniel pulled her closer. I'll help you figure it out. The announcement came 2 weeks later. Victoria Hale stepping down as CEO of Hale Industries, taking on a chairman role to focus on strategic initiatives. The press went wild. Some called it a power play, others called it a defeat. Daniel didn't care what they called it. He just cared that Victoria looked lighter than she had in months. She showed up at the bakery the morning after the announcement, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual suit. I have the day off, she said. The whole day? The whole day. What are you going to do with it? I was hoping you'd teach me to make bread. Daniel laughed. Seriously? Seriously. I want to learn. So he taught her. Showed her how to measure flour by weight, how to knead until the dough fought back, how to shape a boule so it would rise evenly. She was terrible at first, her movements too tentative, but she kept trying. And by the end of the afternoon, she had a misshapen but passable loaf cooling on the counter. I made bread, she said, staring at it like it was the most impressive thing she'd ever done. You did. It's ugly. It's yours. She grinned, and Daniel realized he'd never seen her look this proud of something she'd created. Mia came home from school and immediately zeroed in on the bread. Did Victoria make that? I did, Victoria said. Can I try it? They cut into it together, and even though it was dense and uneven, Mia declared it delicious. Victoria beamed. That night, after Mia was in bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch with glasses of wine. I like this, Victoria said, having time, not rushing to the next meeting or putting out the next fire. You going to be okay without the company? I think so. I'm still on the board, still have my investments, but I'm not in the trenches anymore. And honestly, it feels like I can breathe for the first time in years. So what now? I don't know. I've spent so long chasing the next big thing that I don't know what to do when there's no next big thing. You could just exist, see what happens. That sounds terrifying. It is, but it's also kind of great. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. Will you be patient with me while I figure it out? Always. They sat in silence for a while, and Daniel felt the pieces of their life starting to fit together in a way they hadn't before. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The next few months were a process of adjustment. Victoria threw herself into other projects, mentoring startups, guest lecturing at business schools, spending time with Daniel and Mia. She was restless at first, unsure what to do with herself when she wasn't solving crises. But slowly, she started to settle. She started coming to Mia's soccer games, cheering louder than any of the other parents. She helped Daniel experiment with new recipes at the bakery, turning the kitchen into a mess of flour and failed attempts. She even convinced him to hire an assistant so he could take Sundays off. You need a life outside of this place, she said. I have a life. You have a routine. There's a difference. She wasn't wrong. Daniel had spent so long operating on autopilot that he'd forgotten what it felt like to actually live. With Victoria pushing him, he started taking risks. Small ones at first, closing early one day to take Mia to the beach, saying yes when Victoria suggested a weekend trip to the coast. But each risk felt a little easier than the last. They took Mia camping one weekend, the three of them squeezed into a tent that was definitely not big enough. Mia thought it was the greatest adventure of her life. Victoria, who had never been camping before, was less enthusiastic about the lack of running water and the presence of so many bugs. Why do people do this for fun? She asked, swatting at a mosquito. Because it builds character, Daniel said. I have plenty of character. Different kind of character. Mia dragged them on a hike the next morning, racing ahead on the trail while Daniel and Victoria followed at a slower pace. She's fearless, Victoria said, watching Mia climb over a fallen log. She gets that from her mom. I thought her mom left. She did, but she was fearless too, in her own way. Daniel paused. Leaving took guts, even if it was the wrong choice. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Do you still think about her? Sometimes. Not the way I used to. Now it's more like remembering a different version of my life.
Do you wish things had been different? No, because if they had been, I wouldn't have Mia, and I wouldn't have you. Victoria reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. I love you. Daniel stopped walking. What? I love you.
I've been trying to say it for weeks, but the moment never felt right. But we're standing in the middle of the woods covered in bug spray, and my feet hurt, and I'm pretty sure I have a tick somewhere, and this feels right. Daniel laughed and pulled her close. I love you too, even with the possible tick. That's romance. They kissed, and somewhere ahead of them, Mia shouted that she'd found a cool rock. Victoria pulled away, grinning. We should probably catch up to her. Probably. But they stood there for another moment, just holding each other. And Daniel thought about how strange life was. How a blind date he hadn't wanted to go on had led him here, to this woman, to this moment. Back in the city, things continued to shift. Victoria started spending more nights at Daniel's apartment than at her own place. She kept a toothbrush in his bathroom, clothes in his closet. Mia started calling her Victoria instead of Miss Hale, and sometimes just V when she was feeling especially comfortable. Daniel's mother eventually came around. It took time and more than a few tense dinners, but she saw how happy Victoria made her son. And more importantly, she saw how good Victoria was with Mia. I was wrong about her, his mother admitted one afternoon. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone cold, someone who would get bored and leave. But she's not like that. She cares, really cares. I know. You're going to marry her, aren't you? Daniel hadn't let himself think that far ahead, but now that his mother had said it, he realized the answer was yes. Yeah, I think I am. His mother smiled. Good. Don't wait too long. Life's short. The proposal wasn't planned. Daniel had bought a ring, simple and elegant, because Victoria didn't do flashy. He'd been carrying it around for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. But perfect moments were rare, and Daniel was starting to realize that the imperfect ones mattered more. It was a Tuesday. Mia was at a friend's house, and Daniel and Victoria were at the bakery after hours. Victoria was attempting to make sourdough, her third attempt in as many weeks. The first 2 had been disasters. I don't understand, she said, staring at the starter. I followed the instructions exactly. Baking's not about following instructions, it's about feel. I don't have feel. Yes, you do. You just have to trust yourself. She looked at him, exasperated. I run a billion-dollar company. I can negotiate hostile takeovers, but I can't make bread rise. Different skills. Apparently. Daniel came around the counter and stood behind her, guiding her hands through the motion of kneading. See, you're overthinking it. Just let it happen. Victoria leaned back against him. You make everything seem simple. It's not simple. It just is what it is. She turned in his arms, and suddenly they were facing each other, her hands still covered in flour. I want to spend my life with you, Daniel said. Victoria blinked. What? I want to spend my life with you, you and me and Mia. I want Sunday mornings and terrible camping trips and fights over who forgot to buy milk. I want all of it. Daniel, he pulled the ring box from his pocket, and Victoria's eyes went wide. I'm not good at speeches, he said, but I know I love you, and I know I want you in my life, every day, for as long as you'll have me. So, he opened the box. Will you marry me? Victoria stared at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. For a terrifying moment, Daniel thought she might say no. Then she laughed, actually laughed. You're proposing to me while I'm covered in flour and failing at making bread? Yeah. This is the least romantic proposal in history. Probably. I love it. She threw her arms around his neck. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and somewhere in the background, the bread dough sat forgotten on the counter, already starting to rise. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was crying. Happy tears, the kind Daniel had never seen from her before. I can't believe you proposed in a bakery, she said. Where else would I propose? Literally anywhere else. You want me to do it again? Somewhere fancy? No. This is perfect. And it was. Messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. They told Mia the next day. She screamed so loud that Daniel worried the neighbors would call the police. Then she insisted on planning the wedding immediately, declaring herself the official flower girl and demanding to pick her own dress. "Can I call you Mom?" Mia asked Victoria later when the excitement had died down. Victoria's breath caught. "You want to?" "Yeah, if that's okay." "That's more than okay." Mia hugged her, and Daniel watched from the doorway, his heart so full it hurt. The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends, held in a garden outside the city. Victoria wore a simple white dress, and Mia wore a purple one she'd picked out herself. Daniel wore a suit that Ethan had helped him choose, and he only teared up twice during the ceremony. When the officiant pronounced them married, Victoria kissed him like she meant it, like she was choosing him all over again. At the reception, Mia gave a speech that was mostly nonsense but made everyone laugh. Ethan got drunk and told embarrassing stories about Daniel's childhood. Daniel's mother cried happy tears, and Victoria, who had spent her whole life building empires, stood in the middle of a garden surrounded by people who loved her and realized she'd finally built something that couldn't be taken away. Later that night, after the guests had left and Mia had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, Daniel and Victoria stood in their apartment, her apartment now too, and looked at each other. "We did it," Victoria said. "Yeah, we did." "I'm terrified." "Me too." "But also really happy." "Me too." She kissed him, and they stood there in the quiet, two imperfect people who'd somehow found each other in the chaos. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel wasn't afraid of what came next. Marriage, Daniel discovered, was nothing like he'd imagined. Not worse, not better, just different. More complicated and more simple at the same time. Victoria moved into his apartment above the bakery, which meant suddenly there were expensive shoes next to his work boots by the door, and conference calls happening at the kitchen table while he prepped dough at 4 a.m. "Do you have to be so loud?" Victoria mumbled one morning, her head barely visible under the covers. "It's 5:30. I've been quiet for an hour already." "That's not helping." Daniel grinned and brought her coffee. She sat up, hair a mess, makeup from yesterday still smudged under her eyes, and took the mug with both hands. "I look terrible," she said. "You look like my wife." "Same thing." "Not even close." She smiled despite herself, and Daniel leaned down to kiss her forehead before heading back to the kitchen. This was their new normal. Her chaos mixing with his routine, both of them trying to figure out how to share a life they'd each built alone. The bakery became theirs in ways Daniel hadn't expected. Victoria started keeping books there, working on her laptop at the corner table while customers came and went. She'd take calls with investors and then turn around to help an elderly customer carry their bags to the car. She learned everyone's names, remembered their orders, asked about their families. "You're good at this," Daniel said one afternoon. "At what?" "People. I always thought of you as this intimidating businesswoman. But you're good with people." Victoria looked around the bakery at the mismatched chairs and the chalkboard menu and the worn wooden floors. "I like it here. It's real. Everyone who comes in actually wants to be here. They're not trying to get something from me or position themselves for an advantage. They just want bread. And coffee. And coffee." It was true, but it was also an adjustment. Victoria was used to controlling everything, to making decisions that moved millions of dollars with a single signature. Now she was learning to let go, to trust that the world would keep turning even if she wasn't steering it. The first real test came 3 months after the wedding. One of Victoria's former board members reached out, offering her a CEO position at another company, bigger than Hale Industries, with more prestige, more money, more everything. She told Daniel about it over dinner. Mia was at the table, drawing on a napkin, only half listening. "What did you say?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice neutral. "I said I'd think about it." "Do you want it?" Victoria set down her fork. "Part of me does. The part that's been trained to always reach for the next big thing, but another part of me doesn't want to go back to that life." "Then don't." "It's not that simple." "It is, though. You either want it or you don't." "What if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm giving up too much?" Mia looked up from her drawing. "Are you going to leave?" "No, sweetie, I'm not leaving." "Then why does it matter?" Mia went back to her drawing like she'd just solved the world's problems. Victoria looked at Daniel. "She makes it sound so easy." "Kids usually do." That night, after Mia was asleep, Victoria and Daniel sat on the couch with the windows open, letting in the cool night air. I'm scared, Victoria admitted. Scared that if I turn this down, I'll regret it. Scared that I'm becoming someone small. You're not small. You're just choosing something different. But what if different is wrong? Daniel took her hand. What do you want? Not what you think you should want, not what makes sense on paper. What do you actually want? Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I want to be here, with you and Mia. I want Sunday mornings and terrible camping trips and teaching Mia how to negotiate her allowance. I want a life that isn't measured in quarterly earnings. Then that's your answer. But what if, Victoria, you spent 10 years building an empire. You proved you could do it. Now prove you can choose yourself. She leaned against him and he felt the tension slowly leave her body. Okay, I'll turn it down. And she did. The next day she called and declined the offer. Daniel waited for her to second-guess herself, to spiral into regret, but she didn't. She seemed lighter. How do you feel? He asked. Free? With the pressure of her old life finally behind her, Victoria started exploring what came next. She invested in small businesses, became a mentor to women entrepreneurs, started a fund specifically for supporting family-owned operations. She still worked, still had her hands in deals and decisions, but on her own terms, and she threw herself into the bakery. At first, Daniel was hesitant. You don't have to do this. I want to. It's not glamorous work. Neither was running a company. At least here, the reward is bread. She started learning the business from the ground up. How to manage inventory, negotiate with suppliers, handle the books. She was terrible at baking. Her croissants still came out lopsided more often than not, but she was brilliant at everything else. We should expand, she said one evening, spreadsheets covering the kitchen table. Expand? The bakery, you're at capacity. You turn away catering orders every week because you don't have the space or the staff. We could open a second location, or add a commercial kitchen. Daniel had thought about it before, but always dismissed it as impossible. Too expensive, too risky, too much. But with Victoria, suddenly it didn't seem impossible anymore. They spent weeks planning. Victoria handled the business side while Daniel focused on the operation. They found a space 3 blocks away, bigger than the original bakery, with room for a real kitchen and a small cafe area. They hired staff, 3 bakers and 2 baristas, all young and eager and willing to learn. The expansion was chaos. Permits and inspections and construction delays that pushed their timeline back 3 times. Daniel and Victoria fought about details. He wanted to keep things simple. She wanted to modernize. They compromised, finding a middle ground that felt like both of them. Through it all, Mia was their constant. She'd come to the construction site after school, wearing a too big hard hat and bossing around the contractors. She helped pick paint colors and test recipes and came up with the name for the new location, Brooks and Hale. It's both of you, she said, like it was obvious. The grand opening was on a Saturday in October. The line wrapped around the block. Daniel's hands shook as he unlocked the door, but Victoria squeezed his shoulder. You've got this, she said. We've got this, he corrected. They did. The day was a blur of customers and compliments and selling out of almost everything by noon. By the time they locked up that evening, Daniel was exhausted and exhilarated. We did it, he said. Victoria kissed him. We really did. But success brought its own challenges. The expanded business meant longer hours, more stress, more decisions. Daniel found himself stretched thin, trying to manage both locations while still being present for Mia. He started snapping at employees, forgetting appointments, staying up too late working on spreadsheets he didn't fully understand. Victoria noticed, You're doing too much. I'm fine. You're not. You look exhausted. I just need to figure out the rhythm. Or you need to delegate. I can't just hand off everything I built? Why not? I did. That stopped him. Because she was right. Victoria had walked away from the company she'd built from nothing, trusting others to carry it forward, and she was happier for it. I don't know how to let go, Daniel admitted. Then learn. Start small. Let Marcus handle the morning prep at the original location. Let Sophie manage the new place's staff schedule. Trust the people you hired. It went against every instinct Daniel had. He'd been doing everything himself for so long that the idea of stepping back felt like failure. But he tried. Slowly, bit by bit, he started releasing control. And the bakery didn't fall apart. It thrived. With more time freed up, Daniel found himself actually living instead of just surviving. He started coaching Mia's soccer team. He and Victoria took a cooking class together. Ironically, she was better at Thai food than she was at baking. They went on date nights that didn't end at 9 because he had to be up at 5. One evening, about 6 months after the expansion, Daniel came home to find Victoria and Mia in the kitchen, flour everywhere, attempting to make pasta from scratch. "How's it going?" he asked. "Terrible," Victoria said cheerfully. "But we're learning." Mia held up a misshapen noodle. "Look what I made." Daniel looked at the disaster zone that used to be his kitchen, at his daughter covered in flour, at his wife laughing as she tried to unstick dough from the counter, and he thought about how far they'd come from that first awkward dinner at the Hartley. "I love you both," he said. Victoria looked up. "Where did that come from?" "I don't know. I just needed to say it." She came over and hugged him, getting flour all over his shirt. "We love you too, even when you're sappy." "Especially when he's sappy," Mia added. They ate the terrible pasta together, laughing at how truly awful it was, and Daniel couldn't remember a time he'd been happier. But life had one more test for them. Mia's biological mother showed up in February. No warning, no phone call. She just walked into the bakery one afternoon while Daniel was working the counter. "Hi," she said. Daniel froze. He hadn't seen Lauren in over a year, not since she'd missed Mia's birthday and stopped returning his calls about visitation. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I wanted to see Mia." "You can't just show up. I'm her mother." "You're the woman who gave birth to her. That's not the same thing." Lauren flinched, but she didn't leave. "I know I messed up, but I'm clean now. I've been in therapy. I want to be part of her life again." Daniel felt his chest tighten. This was his worst fear, that Lauren would come back, would want custody, would disrupt the life Mia had finally found stable. "You can't just waltz back in when it's convenient for you." "I'm not trying to take her from you. I just want to see her, talk to her, let her know I'm trying." Before Daniel could respond, Victoria appeared from the back room. She took one look at Lauren, then at Daniel, and understood immediately. "Hi," Victoria said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria, Daniel's wife." Lauren shook it, looking confused. "I'm Lauren, Mia's mother." "I know who you are." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Customers were starting to stare. "Can we talk about this somewhere else?" Victoria asked. They moved to the office in the back. Lauren sat on one side of the desk, Daniel and Victoria on the other. "I'm not trying to cause problems," Lauren said. "I just want a chance to be in Mia's life." "You had that chance, Daniel said, his voice hard. "You had 1,000 chances and you walked away from every single one." "I know, and I'm sorry, but people can change." "Can they? Or do they just say that when they want something?" Victoria put a hand on Daniel's arm, a silent message to ease up. Then she turned to Lauren. "What do you want?" Victoria asked. Specifically, Lauren looked surprised by the directness. "I want to see Mia. Maybe once a week. Get to know her again." And what happens when you decide it's too hard? When the reality doesn't match whatever fantasy you've built in your head? "That won't happen." "You don't know that, and neither do we. But you know who will get hurt if you're wrong? Mia." Lauren's eyes welled up. "I'm trying to do the right thing here." "The right thing would have been staying 4 years ago. This is you trying to ease your guilt. That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's true." Daniel watched Victoria handle this with a calm he couldn't access himself. She was protecting Mia without attacking Lauren, setting boundaries without closing the door completely. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria said. "You want to see Mia? Fine, but it starts slow. Supervised visits here at the bakery. You prove you're consistent, you prove you're serious, and maybe we expand from there. But the first time you disappoint her, the first time you don't show up or make an excuse, that's it. You're done." Lauren nodded quickly. "Okay, yes, I can do that." "I mean it. One strike, you're out." "I understand." After Lauren left, Daniel sat in the office with his head in his hands. Victoria rubbed his back, not saying anything. "What if she hurts Mia again?" Daniel asked. "Then we'll be there to pick up the pieces, just like we always are." "I don't know if I can do this."
Yes, you can, because Mia deserves the chance to know her mother, even if her mother doesn't deserve the chance. Daniel looked up at his wife. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention." They told Mia together that evening. She was quiet at first, processing. "Does she want to be my mom again?" Mia asked. "She wants to try," Daniel said carefully, "but Victoria's my mom now." Victoria's breath caught. "I am, and I always will be. But Lauren will always be part of your story too. It's okay to want to know her. What if she leaves again? Then we'll be sad together, and then we'll keep going, because that's what families do." Mia thought about this. "Okay, I'll see her, but I'm not calling her mom." "You don't have to call her anything you don't want to," Daniel said. The visit started the following week. Lauren came to the bakery every Saturday morning, and she and Mia would sit at a corner table with hot chocolate and cookies. Victoria or Daniel always stayed nearby, watching without hovering. To everyone's surprise, Lauren showed up. Every week, on time, present. She asked Mia about school, about soccer, about her friends. She didn't try to buy Mia's affection or make promises she couldn't keep. She just showed up. After 2 months, Daniel had to admit that maybe people could change, or at least try to. "I'm proud of you," Victoria said one night. "For what?" "For giving her a chance. I know how hard that was. I did it for Mia." "I know, but it still took courage." Daniel pulled her close. "I couldn't have done this without you. Any of it." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." They stood there in the quiet of their apartment, and Daniel thought about all the versions of himself he'd been. The scared 24-year-old who'd become a father before he was ready. The grieving son who'd inherited a bakery he didn't know how to save. The single dad who'd thought romance was something for other people. And now this version, a husband, a father, a business owner who'd learned to share the load. Not perfect, but trying, always trying. A year passed, then 2. The bakery continued to grow. They opened a 3rd location, this one with a full cafe and a teaching kitchen where Victoria held baking classes on weekends. Mia started middle school, somehow both staying exactly the same and changing completely. Lauren remained a steady, if peripheral, presence in Mia's life. They'd never be close the way Mia and Victoria were, but there was a relationship there. Something honest and careful and enough. Daniel's mother admitted she'd been wrong about everything. Ethan got his life together mostly and started dating someone serious. The bakery won awards. Victoria launched a nonprofit supporting family businesses. But the moments Daniel treasured most were the ordinary ones. Sunday mornings when they'd all sleep in and then make elaborate breakfasts that left the kitchen destroyed. Weeknight dinners where Mia would talk for an hour straight about drama at school. Date nights when he and Victoria would try new restaurants and then admit that they preferred eating at home. One evening in late spring, Daniel and Victoria sat on the fire escape outside their apartment. Their bigger apartment now, one they'd moved to when the space above the bakery got too cramped. Mia was inside doing homework, her music playing loud enough that they could hear it through the window. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked. "Your old life, the power, the prestige, all of it." Victoria thought about it. "Sometimes. I miss the adrenaline, the feeling of closing a huge deal, but I don't miss the emptiness. I don't miss going home to an empty apartment and wondering why none of it felt like enough." "And this feels like enough?" She looked at him. "This feels like everything." Daniel kissed her, and somewhere inside, Mia turned her music up even louder. "We should probably tell her to turn that down," Victoria said. "Probably." Neither of them moved, because this was it. This was the life they'd built together. Not the one either of them had planned, not perfect or easy or simple, but theirs. Messy and complicated and real. Daniel had spent years thinking success meant keeping everything under control, never asking for help, never showing weakness. But he'd been wrong. Success was this, sitting on a fire escape with the woman he loved, listening to their daughter's terrible music, wondering what they'd make for dinner. Success was learning that you didn't have to do everything alone, that letting people in wasn't weakness, it was courage. That building a life worth living meant being brave enough to want more than just survival. Victoria had taught him that. She'd shown him that vulnerability wasn't the opposite of strength. It was the foundation of it. That you could be powerful and soft, ambitious and present, successful and human. And together they'd built something neither of them could have built alone. A family, a business, a life that felt full instead of empty, connected instead of isolated. Mia stuck her head out the window. "Are you guys being gross out here?" "Extremely gross," Victoria said. "Can you be gross inside? I need help with my math homework." "You hate math," Daniel said. "I know. That's why I need help." They climbed back inside, and Daniel sat down with Mia at the kitchen table while Victoria started making tea. He looked at the equations in front of his daughter, variables and fractions and problems that seemed impossible until you broke them down step by step. Kind of like life, he thought. "Okay," he said, "let's figure this out together." And they did. The three of them gathered around the kitchen table, working through problems and making bad jokes and being a family. Years later, when Mia was grown and running the bakery herself, all 4 locations by then, she'd tell people the story of how her parents met, how her dad went on a blind date meant for his brother and met a woman who terrified him, how they'd fought for each other when everyone said it wouldn't work, how they'd built something real out of something that started as a mistake. "The thing about my parents," she'd say, "is that they're both stubborn as hell, but they're stubborn about the right things, about showing up, about doing the work, about choosing each other even when it's hard." And she'd think about Sunday mornings and terrible camping trips and the sound of her parents laughing in the kitchen. She'd think about how love wasn't some grand gesture or perfect moment. It was the daily choice to stay, to try, to keep building even when you didn't know what you were doing. She'd think about how her mom, Victoria, not Lauren, though she'd made peace with both of them, used to say that the best things in life were the ones you didn't plan for, the ones that scared you into becoming better than you thought you could be. And she'd know it was true, because some stories don't start with love at first sight or perfect timing or any of the things movies promise. Some stories start with a blind date no one wanted and 2 people too damaged to trust that anything good could last. But the best stories, the ones worth telling, those are the ones where people show up anyway, where they choose each other through the doubt and the fear and the 1,000 small moments that make up a life, where they build something that matters not because it was easy, but because they were brave enough to try. Daniel and Victoria's story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. And in the end, that was everything.